also to improve program outcomes. And as you may have just heard, as I did, we will be recording this session. So if you have to drop off early, or if you have a colleague that you think it would be useful for, we'll be able to share that with you at some later time. So just a quick little bit of background. My team at Casey provides consultation to states and counties nationwide, and we're engaged in data analysis related to 4E demonstration projects in many jurisdictions. What I'm particularly excited about with this tool that you'll be seeing today, as well as other methods that are similar to this tool, is that it really helps us connect finance data to program outcomes. And that, I think, is a gap currently in the field. And so this can really help program administrators understand where you have an opportunity for impact and play that out using this methodology. So, right, we're all thinking about waiver demonstration projects, and in the capped allocation situation, you have to continue to fund your existing system. The goal, though, is to generate some opportunities for reinvestment or some savings by using particular strategies. So maybe that's reducing the number of youth placed in congregate care, or shortening the time they spend there, stepping them down to less restrictive settings, or reducing the number of kids that come in the front door. Right? You have these opportunities to generate some savings and then reinvest those funds in other areas. So the tool we'll learn about today was developed for use in California, so it will be presented as a very California-centric tool, but it is publicly available. It can be adapted for use in any other jurisdiction. It's essentially a set of spreadsheets that allow you to connect your anticipated program outcomes with your financial data to project where some savings might occur. And then ideally you would monitor your actual spending to see if you're on track. And it's really important to monitor this with some frequency, right? Well, all of these concepts should be integrated into your formal demonstration evaluation. You really can't afford to wait for evaluation results and need a way to monitor this kind of thing more often. So to give you a sense of what the agenda is going to look like, we're going to start with Daniel Webster, who will show us the California Child Welfare Indicators Project website, where the data come from for the placement days analysis, and he'll talk a bit about the methodology. And then I think Bill Dawson is going to take over, and he'll demonstrate his mastery of Excel by showing us how the placement days tool works using some practice examples that actually come from current waiver states. And we'll wrap up with some time for Q&A. Knowing that it will be getting late for East Coasters, we're going to try to keep this to an hour. During the Q&A, we're going to also have Melissa Jacks available to us. She has extensive experience with financial data analysis in the context of a 4E waiver. And I'm going to step off now and allow Melissa to quickly introduce herself, and then we will start right in with the demonstration. So thank you all again for registering, and we hope that you find this very valuable. Melissa?
Hi, this is Melissa Jacks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Melissa. Thanks. Melissa, thanks.
Thank you. I was like, uh-oh. This is Melissa Jacks. I've been working the past 6 months or so with Casey Family Programs, working with states on waiver application and implementation. Prior to that, I had the pleasure of actually implementing a waiver in Florida. We got waiver authority back in 2006 on the last day that authority was granted. So I have some state experience and was Chief of Staff at the Administration for Children and Families recently as well, so some federal experience. And the most fun experience is right now helping people think through how to connect the programs and the dollars, and especially in terms of getting more flexibility and better outcomes for the families we serve. So I will wrap it up.
Thanks, Melissa. And this is Bill Dawson. I'm a project manager and analyst with the California Child Welfare Indicators Project, CCWIP, or we now call it CWIP, at UC Berkeley School of Social Welfare. And we collaborate with the California Department of Social Services to maintain a public website that provides information about California's child welfare system. And with Casey Family Programs and Susan Smith's team, we collaborate in the Casey Berkeley Data Advocacy Project, which allows us to provide support to other jurisdictions nationwide. And as Melissa Correa indicated, and as I believe probably everyone on this call knows, the FOIA waiver demonstration projects you are undertaking have a variety of goals and approaches, but in all cases there is a cost neutrality requirement. So as a result, the ability to undertake innovative programs and services depends on your ability to reduce the amount that you spend relative to your historical board and care costs. And in developing your FOIA waiver projects, you've thought this through or are in the process of thinking it through. To provide a little context for the Placement Days tool, I wanted to present a kind of simple framework for this. I'm just going to share my screen here. And so just to kind of ground this and hopefully help the tool make sense, you have money available for innovative services when you are able to reduce placement days or children and youth are in less expensive placements. And throughout the discussion today, we're going to use the term placement days to mean one day of foster care for a child or youth. And the particular way we use it with the report that Daniel will show you, it means it's limited within a particular time frame. So the placement days that happen within a year, and we'll talk a little more about that later. But you get money available by either reducing the placement days or having those placement days be less expensive. And the ways you reduce placement days are by having fewer children and youth enter foster care or re-enter foster care, or their placements on average are shorter and you manage to keep the same number of placements. And on the other side, in terms of making them less expensive, one main way to do that is to move them from congregate care to family settings. So I just want to introduce that. And these three strategies for making money available for innovative services, we'll come back to. So fewer entries, shorter placements, and movement from congregate care to family settings. To look into this, we need some information. We need to know our current placement days, and we also need to know the cost of those days. And the way we're developing this in California, the source for the number of placement days, and importantly by placement type, since the cost varies, comes from our website. And Daniel's going to introduce you to the placement days report on our website. It'll just take me a moment to get there.
Great. Thanks, Bill. So while he's getting there, I'm Daniel Webster. I'm the project director of the California Child Welfare Indicators Project at Berkeley. I work for Barbara Needell. She is our principal investigator, and we have a staff of other programmers and researchers and graduate students who help us with this work. The analysis that Bill has brought up is the placement days analysis, and this is the basis of the output that you get from this interactive dynamic report on our website. The data get exported from this and then imported into the Excel tool that Bill will be demonstrating here in a moment. But from our website, which we would all encourage you to visit if you haven't had the opportunity to already, from the main page, go to the placement days hyperlink, which will take you to this page. Then you would select multi-time periods for a California or a single county. We're just going to leave it on California. We'll come back to that page at the end of the talk to show the resources that are on that page with respect to the tool that we're demoing, as well as some user guide and some other important information. But for now, let's go ahead and step through the analysis. generating these data. We'll leave it to the default of California, number of placements, and leave it to the default of July to June, which is our current rolling year for our most recent data. Hitting next, we'll select in placement before start period, no. Okay, so that means that this is a filter that will say the resulting output will be children who were not in placement before the start date. That is to say, they are entering care during the different periods of time, which will be shown on the output, which we're about to go to. So let's go ahead and click Finish, and the resulting table is the columns are 365-day periods of time, year blocks. The rows are placement types, and then the data in the cells are the number of placements that occurred let's say for a given time period. Let's go to the most recent one, Bill, and say for July 2012 to June 2013, there were a total of 46,000 some odd total placements. Now, a child in that 12-month block can be counted multiple times. It's just counting a child. If they were in kinship care, they would be counted in placement there once. If they then moved to foster care, they'd be counted in the foster care row. And then if they went back to kinship care, then they would increment the kinship care cell once more. So a child can be counted multiple times over the course of the year. Actually, up to 365 times a child could be counted. And those placements during that 12-month block of time could be distributed across any of those rows. Now let's go up and look at there's a multi-report option on this, which if we select placements and placement days, go ahead and give us the result on that. And what this does is now it gives us on the same page, on a single page, the data that we were just talking about in terms of placements, but then below it gives us another table that that shows us the number of placement days or care days that occurred within each of those respective placement types. And so, for example, again, for kinship care, we had, I forget however many placements during the most recent time period, but then this further specification shows us the number of days that care days that were spent in that type of placement, and it was over 1 million for kinship care. And then we've got the total down for all placement care days at the bottom of the table. And so these two tables are the underlying data that gets exported and put into the Excel tool, which Bill will be showing you. Now let me, before I hand it back over to Bill, I just wanted to stress that this analysis that we're showing, this number of placements in a year and placement care days during the year, is useful for, as Bill and Melissa were saying, in terms of looking at fiscal impacts. But what this is not useful for is for examining issues of length of stay or time in care, time to permanency, those kinds of issues. Because again, each of these columns is circumscribed around a single 12-month time period. Children are counted multiple times and across different types of care. So you can't really use these data to be answering questions about lengths of stay or time in care, those kinds of things. As you all know, or as many of you are probably familiar, there are much better longitudinal data analyses, entry cohort measures, tracking children over time, looking at their status at different follow-up periods that are far superior in terms of answering questions of duration. But I just wanted to make that point before we move on.
And just to say that we can also here on the site, if we go back, we have this other option to generate the counterpart to that table. So this is children who were in care at the beginning of each of the specified time period. So this is the in-care group, and I think our time is such that we can take a quick look at that.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah. So Bill's. Thank you for reminding me. So yes, in terms of the tool that we're about to show you, before we pull the data over there, yeah, as Bill's pointing out, you've got the kids who we were just talking about, those that were not in care before the time period began. That is to say the entries. Now we're taking the same view of each of these different 12-month intervals, and we're looking at who is in care on day one of that given interval. And I mentioned this earlier talking to our colleagues, Melissa and Melissa, about the stock and the flow aspect of the children in your foster care system, to quote our eminent colleague Fred Woolshin. So if we want to get a handle on those children in our system, it's important to take account of both those children in care, the stock, as well as those entering care, the flow. And these tables here that Bill has generated for us show us both, again, the number of placements for those children in care at the beginning of the time period, the number of placements that occurred during the year on the top there, and then on the bottom, the corresponding number of placement care days for those respective placements in the different time intervals.
Good, thanks, Daniel. And so from there, we will move to a look at the tool, and I'm just going to switch that over now. So what you'll see on screen now, and Melissa, if you could just confirm that you're seeing the data sheet for the entries.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And what we have here is brought over from the website. We exported those tables that we were just looking at and simply pasted them into this, in this case, onto the data, the entries worksheet. And so we have, in exactly the same format as we had on the web, we have columns representing years. The rows are placement types. We have two tables, the first one being those children who entered at some point during the indicated year, and down below the count of placement days, of care days. And again, this is for the entries, and there's a corresponding worksheet in the tool for the children that were in care at the beginning of the year. So we brought over those two. And the reason that we are making this distinction, making a deal about this distinction, is that we felt it made sense, especially when we're talking about interventions to reduce, that your interventions are probably going to differ for children entering care versus other interventions that are focused on children who are already in care. So those types of step-down interventions that we mentioned. And we just, because the purpose of this tool is to help conceptualize, explore
the impact.
Thank you. The impact of your interventions. We thought this was a useful way to split it up. So once these data are here on the worksheet, they become available on a calculation tab. And I'm going to run through this. Everywhere on this tab, the cells with a yellow background are cells where you can make a selection or enter data. And so the first one is just to pick the time period from the various time periods we brought in, pick a time period that you want to use as your starting point. For today, we're going to use the most recent that we have available, the July 2012 through June 2013. But there might be cases where it made more sense to use an earlier time period as your reference point.
Or, for example, as one of our colleagues was saying when we presented this before, you could look at expenditures in earlier time periods and then look at them more recently if you wanted to get an idea of your trends even over the past several years in preparation for making your projections or thinking about what your waiver baselines might be. You want to know what direction you've been trending over the past couple of years to begin with.
Exactly. And so what we have here, the way this worksheet is organized, the columns represent the various placement types that we saw in the data. And we have kin care, or I think relative care as it may be referred to in other jurisdictions. Apologies for the background noise. We have a truck backing up.
Berkeley campus. I think it's landscaping day today or something.
There we go. So each column represents a placement type, and then the rows are various data. And the placements here in the actual row, these are the data brought over from the data we loaded in. And then the other data that came directly from that data sheet are the placement days. This worksheet then gives you some additional information. It calculates the average number of days within each of these placements. So you're dividing this, for this kin column, you're dividing the 1,864 plus thousand placement days by the just over 15,000 placements that happened during this time period, and getting an average of 124 placement days. And again, as Daniel cautioned, this is not length of stay. This is all confined within the year. So it's not even an average of those placements. It's just how many, for the placements that happened, were open at some point during the year. On average, how many days fell within the year. The other thing that we have here, and this, I'll expand things a bit. Down below, we have some rate information. Again, this is in yellow, so we have default values loaded in there. And for California, these are values from the state's published reimbursement rates for the different placement types. They are simplified, so they are estimates. Some of these placement types, the rates vary by the child's age, by the level of care, and so on. But we applied some averaging or took various points to try and get a number that would be useful to help us understand the dynamics. So you can see for kin, the rate per day we're using $23.80. We take the placement days and multiply it by that to get the total cost for kin care here for the entire state of California. It's at $44 million plus. We are using the California data as the example today, but that's not typically how someone would work with it. California has a county administered system, and so much more likely is that we would have county analysts making use of this tool and working with county level data, or perhaps even a subset of that. But for California, these are the values we get. And over on the far right, we get a total across all of the placement types.
For the kids entering here, again,
yes,
this is restricted to those kids entering, and there are other sheets for those in care, right?
That's right. So already that is, we've got some new information. We've added information about average number of placement days in a placement, and we've also added this financial information and calculated it out. And so starting to quantify what's going on, hopefully in a fairly easy to read format. But we wanted to do a little more than that. So the next thing that you can do, and we've been alluding to this, is to adjust these values as a way of kind of trying to project and understand what the impacts of your interventions might be. As the first example, since we're on the Entries tab, we want to look at an example, an intervention focused. You can think of this as if you were implementing an alternative response, or what's sometimes I think referred to as a diversion program. You would hope to reduce the number of entries during the year. And I'm going to try and keep the numbers fairly simple here, but let's say you're focused on reducing entries to, and foster here refers to county foster care in California. FFA is foster family agency with more treatment foster care. We'll just use the foster care as an example. And if we were able, our plan is, our hope is, based on maybe some pilot programs, that we can reduce the number of entries within a year by 750. And so within that yellow square, I simply type in minus 750. And that then updates these rows of adjusted data. And so it immediately adjusts the number of placements down by 750. We're not adjusting the average number of placement days at this point, but we also see an adjustment that because there's fewer placements, there are fewer placement days. The green highlighting here indicates that the change is in the desired direction, and then we see that flow through to a lower dollar amount, and highlighted here is the saving. And with that, if we were able to bring about that change, it's a ballpark savings of 1.3, just over 1.3 million. I'm wondering if there's maybe just pause and see if there's questions at this point, if anyone wants to raise a hand with our wait for time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got 10 minutes still.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
What I'd like to do here, just because we've been running through a good bit of material, just pause to see if there's any, maybe a question specific to what we're looking at here. So if there's just any aspect of the organization of the tool that's giving you trouble, raise your hand and I can try to clarify that. We will have time at the end for broader questions and things like that. So please just use the raise hand button to raise your hand if there's something about the current demonstration you'd like me to clarify.
There's also more material to cover as well, so that questions may arise as we move along as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. I will continue. So far, so good. So the other piece here is, and this is, and I suspect many of you have been doing this kind of thinking. If you're implementing an intervention, you're hoping to reduce entries to foster care, that's probably going to have effects elsewhere in your system. So we might say that with an alternative response, let's say that we expect that actually families and extended families are going to get more involved, and we may not fully prevent placements. So we here maybe see what would happen if these kin or relative care placements increased by 250. So we managed to prevent 500 foster care placements with our alternative response, and some of those, 250 of those end up being diverted to relative placements. Here you see the effect of that. Because it's a change not in the typically desired direction, it's highlighted in red. We see an increase to 15,288 placements, corresponding increase in placement days, and increase in dollars. But because we managed to prevent a net of 500, we see some savings in the amount of 0.3%, a reduction in overall 0.3%. In this case, just over $500,000. So that's an example looking at from the slide at the beginning, one of the fundamental things we looked at was reducing the number of children who enter care. So that's an example of tackling things in that way. Another thing we looked at was shortening placements. And we can do an example of that. If we were focused on reducing the length of time that children spend in shelter care, this is how we would do it. So we can adjust the number of placements as we did above. We can also adjust the average number of placement days and track through the implications of that. So currently, the average length or the average number of placement days for our shelter placements is 17 days. If we felt that we had a program planned that could reduce that safely to 2 weeks, we can adjust here by subtracting 3 days. It adjusts it then to an average of 14. In turn, reduces our placement days. And because the shelter care is with group care, both of these congregate care types are the expensive ones, we actually realize quite a large savings. If we do have a program that can reduce by a relatively small amount the amount of time spent in shelter, we can free up a good bit of money. So, and now of course the total is taking into account both of those interventions used in combination. So the prevention of entries with alternative response, and this targeted approach to shortening shelter stays. And now we're up to saving 0.9%, just over $1.7 million. We want to look as well at the in-care group. Those were, we applied those interventions just to the group that were entering during the year. Let's go look at the group who were already in care at the beginning of the year. And this is a much larger number of placement days, and therefore in a larger amount of money involved here. Here we want to go to that third strategy, or third approach of moving children and youth from expensive care to less expensive care. And we're going to use that example of stepping children down from group care into FFAs. And again, in California, that's Foster Family Agency, and provides more services, has some augmented services. In terms of the cost, it's the rate that we have that we're using is $51 a day, so it is more expensive, more than twice as expensive as the conventional foster care, but much less expensive than the congregate care types, and that's why we would, if we think that is possible, that makes sense in terms of our programs. We can still maintain child safety, child well-being. That's what we're going to do. So here, we're not going to attempt to, we're not saying that we're going to try to reunify or have any of these children exit. But we are going to reduce our group population by 1,000, and we see the immediate and quite large benefit of that. That reduces our placement days in group care from 1.16 million days to just over 1 million days. Goes from 292 to 260 million, a savings of over $30 million, which is 4.4% of our total. Okay, but they're not leaving entirely. So we need to reflect the fact that we're going to move these children into a less restrictive form of care. And here, again, because that's going not in the desired direction, but still it's part of our overall plan, goes up to over 25,000 placements. We'll come back to that. Increases the placement days to 4,172,000, increase in cost, but still well offset by that savings in group expenditures on group care.
So a simple step down from congregate to treatment foster care basically saved $23 million in these data.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty significant.
I want to show one other feature here, and I think it's something it's an attempt to give people using this tool the ability to do a little bit more fine-grained adjustment. You can simply adjust the average number of placement days for all children and youth in a placement type, or you can specifically adjust for children who either left or entered a placement type. So in this case, with this example of 1,000 children stepping down from group care into FFAs, we might, in our planning, we might anticipate that their placements are going to last a bit longer than the group that are in FFAs right now. So if we think that is going to be for those 1,000 children, they're going to move in and they're going to have these placements that last, say, 2 weeks longer than the group that's already there, we can add this adjustment new row applies an increase in the average of 14 days specifically to those 1,000 children. So you can see, because the 1,000 children is a relatively small portion of the total FFA placements, the average for all FFAs just goes up a little bit. but we do see an increase in placement days, and of course then the dollar value is adjusted up a bit as well. It will not, that type of change in this scenario didn't have a big impact on our total dollars or the percentage that we're saving, but it lets you do a little bit more nuanced planning. We hope that's the intent there. And I think whether you're using this tool or approaching this yourself, it is something to think about if your interventions are focused on particular groups of children. You want to think about, are those children different from the other children in the placement type that they're leaving or the placement type that they're moving to? So this tool lets you make that kind of adjustment. So I just want to kind of wrap up this section by just reiterating that you can free up dollars by reducing placement days, by reducing placement cost. We looked at examples of both of those. We looked at them for children entering care and looked at interventions that were focused on children who were already in care. And I guess our thinking is that, or to my mind, the value of a method like this or using this tool is it lets you quantify and hopefully reveal the implications of decisions that you're making. And others may be savvier than me, but I feel like my intuition is not always a good guide for this understanding a situation like this. Some small changes can have a surprising impact. I think for me that example where we reduced shelter stays by 3 days, and I know that those things are not necessarily like easier said than done, but if you're able to make that relatively small change in how long those placements last on average, it had to me a surprisingly large impact on finances. And so that's a tool like this or using a quantitative approach to these questions can be very helpful. I wanted to just quickly talk about use of this tool by other jurisdictions. As was mentioned earlier, this is available on our website. We looked at the data coming in from our website in this particular format, but it does not need to be like that. Just very quickly. This is just made up data, but these are kind of the minimum requirements for what needs to be in here. So you don't need multiple time periods. You don't need, obviously you don't need colored backgrounds or anything. You don't need our headers on there. You can load data in this format again, you need to be able to get your data in this account of placements within whatever time period. So we were doing a year. If you want more frequent review of data, it can be monthly data if you're able to generate data in that form. And the key right now is just that you have at the top of your table, you have that label kin. So that is the California-centric aspect here. But other than that, these can read other placement types. It is not there now. I am going to update the documentation for this tool to describe exactly these requirements that I'm talking through right now. I expect to have that available early next week. And just to wrap that up, down here you then also need a table of placement days. And then of course on the calculation tab, you would need to input appropriate rate data for your jurisdiction, something that makes sense for you there. But you'll notice up here that the time period is reflected. Final thing, which I neglected when we were looking at ours, we modeled for entries, we modeled for in-care. There is a total tab that pulls all of that together and looks at the total picture. So I'm back, same format as the worksheets. This one is just display, and it shows the various adjustments that we made to entries and in care, pulls those together. If we were using those 3 or 4 interventions that we looked at as examples, we can see the overall impact for the state, a reduction from $922 million to $898 million, savings of 2.6%, and with using these estimates, freeing up something like $24 million. From there, I will pass it to Melissa Jocks, whose expertise is in the financial arena, and she will add some comments.
Thank you. I only have a few. I want to leave it open for questions as long as I can, but I think that this is a really excellent way to isolate interventions that you might apply only to children, new children coming into care. A lot of times when we think about, how is our intervention going to impact, we just think, oh, we'll reduce the overall number of children in care by this. And I think sometimes we overestimate what that impact is because we're applying it to the entire population. This really allows you to look first at new entries and then at the existing population and some things you might be able to do there. I also understand this can be used possibly on a monthly basis. I think that as many states apply for, implement, track cost savings for waiver application, this is an excellent tool and a dynamic tool. I would highly recommend that it is prepared on a monthly basis moving forward for any state implementing who wants to track what they thought was going to happen and then what did happen. So I'll leave it at that. Very excited about it and can't wait to play around with it. And go ahead and open it up for questions.
I think that you have the ability, just give me a moment here. The issue I'm having is that our participant list is mainly phone numbers, and when you put up your hand, it's by your name under the web list, so I can't quickly list. So maybe what we could try is if you can raise your hand, and then I will let you know by name to go ahead and unmute yourself. So if you have a question that you'd like to put to any of us, please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, Cosette Mills, if you could, I believe you probably have the ability to unmute yourself. Can you give that a try?
Why don't we unmute everybody? Okay,
let's
unmute everybody, and then people can raise their hand, and then we'll call them. How about that?
Sure. Okay. Well, hopefully we will. We're going to unmute everyone. I hope we don't get any terrible feedback. Bear with us.
The conference has been unmuted.
Hi, this is Cosette. So I've got a couple of questions, but the first one, so I wasn't really clear. So this is available, that's something that other states can use and access, correct, online? And you'll send instructions for that out sometime next week or so?
That's right. This is the tool. It was developed here for the data we were demoing, which was from California, and it loads on the California website. However, the tool is a shell that Bill has developed that was flexible, and as he was showing there, you could input your own data, but you would need to have an analysis of placement days, placements and placement days available to you to input into the tool.
Okay. And would the tool still be hosted at the Berkeley site, or is that something we would download and just use and manage in our own?
You would download it yourself. But why don't we go to the site? We actually take this opportunity to show folks where with those. Well, when we stepped quickly through the placement days analysis on our website, and I mentioned that there were some resources there. At that analysis index page for the placement days, on the bottom there you'll see we've got the current version of the placement days documentation, tool documentation, and the Excel tools itself. And Bill will be updating some of the documentation to talk about the non-California users and maybe some of those considerations like that monthly, the minimum requirements, et cetera, that kind of thing. So look for that to be updated within the next week or so. We'll also be following up this webinar with emails to all registered participants, right?
Yep.
With links to this as well. So be looking for that.
And then I have two other quick questions. One is, have you done a version of this that would also do an FMAP calculation so you can actually determine the amount of 4E savings that you would have?
Okay, go through the kitchen.
That's a good question. I think we have not. We have some 4E eligibility indications in our data that are not the most reliable. I think we had another jurisdiction that mentioned something along those lines too. Our data are able to be filtered by some 4E eligibility, but we're not very confident of how accurate or reliable those are. So it's conceivable that you could filter the data any way that your jurisdiction has the capacity of filtering. And if you feel that that's reliable, yes, then that could be a way to take a look at the data. Other ways would be looking at only specific age ranges or only ethnic groups, so that kind of thing. You could select, certain groups and then upload those data to the tool to examine, the trends for just those groups.
Okay, so it would be just basically we decide how we would load our data based on the data we want to focus on.
Basically, yes, exactly. Basically, that would be the approach. Now, yeah.
Just to say, I think that the tool is designed with that hope that people will, both on the program side and on the finance side, can kind of bring their expertise together and come up with the the child welfare data that's most applicable, and then also the correct the dollar amounts that make the most sense and are going to be the most helpful for you. But that's why we set it up so that those are just, we have those default dollar values in there for California, but that's completely, those are just changed by entering a new value into that cell.
And then just one last question, and I'll let other folks know. Do you have any tools that you've done with strategies for savings on the admin side? I'm thinking in terms of cost neutrality, there's both the maintenance side and the admin side, and this one clearly focuses on maintenance, so I was just curious.
Melissa, do you have any comments to that?
My comment would be, I think that's an excellent question, and I was thinking in my head how I might do that, and the only thing I thought of is if you are looking at a significant reduction in days, that means a significant reduction in caseload. Does that mean that there would be a reduction in your workforce? But that's as close of a estimate I could make, moving from the placement days to admin without a tool.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Tammy Cordova, did you have a question for the group?
Tammy's hand was raised. I guess maybe Tammy's questions got answered.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions from folks?
Okay. Well, if not, Daniel, did you want to just kind of summarize in terms of what the follow-up will be?
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to let folks know that you will, as I was mentioning before, you're going to receive an email with links to the California, the CWIP website. It'll have a link to the placement days report page, which has what we're looking at now, that has these different resources, both the online report, obviously, but then the report methodology, as well as the user guide PDF form and the Excel versions of the tool for you to download. There's also, I wanted to let folks know that we are an open source shop, and so we freely want to share the work that we do with any jurisdictions, down to discussions about our approach methodologically, which you can see from the methodology, but also we're open to sharing our SAS code for how we queried our SACWA system to create create these data. And actually, let me take the moment now to acknowledge Joe Magruder on our staff, who was really the key developer in terms of making this this placement days analysis possible. We worked with took the lead from our colleagues at Chapin Hall because they have a care days analysis that they developed, and we, as we often do, collaborating, working with them, developed this tool. And Joe was the analysis, and Joe was the key person on that. So we want to acknowledge him, and of course Barbara Needell, our principal investigator, and Jennifer Lawson, one of our graduate student researchers who worked a lot on this. But so look for those emails with that follow-up data. Also, would alert you to that this webinar has been recorded, and that will be available. We should be posting that probably here with these other resources that we were just looking at here on the website as well for your weekend viewing pleasure, in case you really want to
I'm not sure.
play it again.
I'm not sure it'll be up this weekend, so you might have to hold off
for next week.
Put it on your calendar for next week.
Next weekend viewing pleasure.
For movie night.
That's good. Okay. And then finally, let's see. We would love for you to send us comments at the end of this webinar. There'll be a pop-up window that'll ask you for your experience in the Ready Talk webinar, and there's a place to write comments. And if you had comments, questions, anything, we'd very much appreciate your feedback, and it would be emailed to us directly. So we'd just be looking forward to any input we could get from you, our colleagues.
Melissa, any closing thoughts?
Just thank you to everyone. We're really happy so many folks registered and participated in the webinar, so thank you for taking the time out of your day. Please get in touch with us. We're happy to help facilitate the use of these tools. Thanks to the guys in California, as always, for being fabulous colleagues. So have a great day.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all for attending. Hope it was helpful.
Yeah. Bye-bye now.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand by.